In the summer of 1227, the most powerful man on earth died. His empire stretched from Korea to the gates of Vienna. 40 million souls lived under his shadow. His armies had rewritten the map of the world, and then he vanished. Not metaphorically, not into legend, literally. Genghis Khan, the man who conquered a quarter of the planet, disappeared so completely that 8 centuries later, we still don't know where his body rests. No tomb, no monument, no stone with his name, just silence. And here's what makes it stranger. This wasn't an accident. It was designed, orchestrated with the same precision he used to conquer nations. A final campaign not of expansion, but of erasure. Teams of archaeologists have searched. Satellites have scanned the steppe. Governments have spent fortunes, and the earth has kept it secret. Because somewhere beneath the grasslands of Mongolia, beneath 800 years of wind and forgetting, lies the answer to a question that haunts historians. How do you hide an emperor? And more importantly, why? Tonight, we follow the trail of that silence. Not to find the tomb, but to understand why it was never meant to be found. The year is 1227. August. Somewhere in the Liupan Mountains, along what is now the border between China and Mongolia, a man takes his final breath. He is 65 years old. His name, in his own tongue, is Temujin. The world knows him as Genghis Khan. Around him, the air is thick with summer heat. The campaign against the Tangut kingdom has nearly ended, but he will not see its conclusion. Fever, some chronicles say. A fall from his horse, say others. The true cause dissolves into rumor and time. What matters is what happens next. His generals gather in silence. No wailing, no public mourning, no announcement to the empire, because this is not a funeral, it is an operation. The body is placed on a cart, covered in felt. A procession begins moving north, back toward Mongolia, back toward the sacred mountains where he was born. And as the cart rolls across the steppe, something extraordinary unfolds. Every person it encounters, herders, travelers, merchants crossing the grasslands, is killed. Not out of cruelty, not out of rage, out of necessity, because the location of Genghis Khan's burial site must remain unknown. Not just hidden, unknowable. The Persian historian Rashid al-Din would later write, "The place of his tomb was made a secret, and those who knew it were commanded to die." Commanded. Not accidentally, not coincidentally. The secrecy wasn't a side effect of chaos. It was the plan. As the procession moves through the emptiness, the only witnesses are the sky and the grass. By the time the cart reaches its destination, some say Burkhan Khaldun, the mountain of his youth, an estimated 4,000 people have been silenced. 4,000 voices, erased to protect one grave. The body is lowered into the earth. No marker is placed, no shrine was constructed. Then, according to Mongol tradition, horses are driven over the site, again and again, until the soil is indistinguishable from the surrounding steppe. Within weeks, grass begins to grow, and within months the emperor of the world is gone. Not just dead, unmapped. The chroniclers would write of his deeds, the poets would sing of his conquests, but his resting place would become a question mark on the earth, a mystery guarded not by walls or soldiers, but by deliberate, calculated forgetting. And it worked. For 800 years it has worked. Here is what we know for certain. The disappearance of Genghis Khan's tomb was not a mystery that happened. It was a mystery that was built, and the architects were his own people. In most empires, a ruler's death triggers monumental construction. Pyramids rise in Egypt. Mausoleums sprawl across Persia. Emperors of China rest in underground cities guarded by terracotta armies. Death, for most rulers, is the ultimate monument, a final declaration, "I was here." But Genghis Khan chose the opposite. He chose absence, and the Mongols executed that choice with military precision. Let's start with what the sources tell us. The Secret History of the Mongols, the oldest surviving Mongolian text, barely mentions his death. A few lines, no location, no ceremony described. Almost as if the chronicler himself was instructed to forget. The Persian historians, writing decades later, offer more detail, but even they speak in riddles. Rashid al-Din writes that the tomb site was leveled by 10,000 horses. Juvaini, another chronicler, claims the site was flooded, that a river was temporarily diverted over the grave, then returned to its course, hiding the burial beneath moving water forever. Are these accounts literal, symbolic, both? We don't know, but what emerges from every source is the same intent. No one must know. The Mongols had practical reasons. Grave robbing was rampant in the 13th century. Tombs of kings were looted for gold, weapons, and treasures. But there was something deeper at work, something spiritual. In Mongol cosmology, the earth itself was sacred. Mountains, rivers, the endless steppe. These were not just landscapes, they were beings. To disturb the earth for a monument was to wound it. Genghis Khan had been born near Burkhan Khaldun, the God Mountain, a place so holy that for centuries no one but shamans and the royal family could approach it. To be returned to that mountain, unmarked, unannounced, absorbed back into the land, was not erased. It was a reunion. The Mongols believed that in death, the great Khan would rejoin the eternal blue sky, Tengri, and the sacred soil of his ancestors. A tomb would trap him. A monument would cage his spirit. So they gave him the steppe instead. All of it. But there's another layer to this secrecy, one that speaks to power. Empires are fragile things. When a conqueror dies, the vultures circle. Sons fight for succession. Generals declare themselves king. The realm fractures. Genghis Khan knew this. He had watched his own father poisoned. He had survived betrayals, coups, assassinations. So before his death he left instructions. His body would vanish, not to protect it from robbers, but to protect the empire from collapse. Because if no one knew where he was buried, no one could desecrate the site. No rival could defile his grave. No enemy could claim victory by standing over his bones. He would remain in death what he had been in life, untouchable, unknowable, everywhere. And so the operation unfolded. The funeral procession left no witnesses. The burial site was erased by hoofbeats and possibly water. The soldiers who dug the grave were reportedly executed, their silence guaranteed by death. And then came the final stroke. The Mongol rulers who followed Genghis Khan declared the region around Burkhan Khaldun forbidden. For centuries, it was illegal to enter, not just for foreigners, for anyone. The mountain became a no-man's land, a sacred void in the center of the empire. Maps were drawn without it. Travelers routed around it, and slowly, over generations, even the Mongols themselves forgot exactly where their greatest Khan had been laid to rest. The secrecy became so successful, it erased itself. This is how you make a man disappear, not by hiding him poorly, but by making forgetting a form of reverence, by turning absence into legend, by ensuring that the search itself becomes impossible. Because the map was burned before it was ever drawn, and for 800 years it has remained so. To understand why Genghis Khan's tomb vanished, you have to understand what death meant to the Mongols, not as a concept, as a practice. Because the Mongol relationship with death was not like ours. It was not mournful in the way we understand mourning. It was not public in the way we build memorials. It was silent, spatial, woven into the land itself. Let's go back further, Before Genghis Khan united the tribes, before he became the scourge of empires, the Mongols were nomads. They lived on the steppe, an ocean of grass stretching 5,000 miles, from Manchuria to the edges of Europe. No cities, no walls, no permanence. Everything moved. The herds moved with the seasons. The jurs, felt tense, were packed and unpacked with the rhythm of survival. Even the idea of ownership was fluid. You didn't own land, you passed through it. But certain places were different. Certain mountains, certain rivers. These were sacred, not because temples stood on them, but because they had always been there, eternal, unchanging. While humans wandered, the mountains remained. At the center of Mongol spirituality was Tengri, the eternal blue sky. Tengri was not a god in the Western sense, not a figure with a face, a voice, commandments carved in stone. Tengri was present. The sky above, the wind that moved through it, the storm that brought rain, the stillness after snow, and beneath Tengri the earth, Etujen, the sacred mother. These two forces held the cosmos together, sky and soil, breath and dust. When a Mongol died, their spirit didn't ascend to heaven in the Christian sense. It rejoined the sky, and their body returned to the earth. Not in a coffin, not behind stone doors, into it. Mongol burial practices varied by tribe, but the elite followed a pattern. The body was dressed in fine garments, silk, furs, the armor of their deeds. Sometimes a horse was killed, the rider's companion in life, sent with them into death. The grave was dug in a remote location, often on a hillside, always in silence. The body was placed inside, sometimes seated as if still riding. Then the grave was filled, and here's where it becomes different from nearly every other culture. No stone, no inscription, no marker of any kind, because to mark a grave was to separate the dead from the land. To name them was to trap them. The Mongols believed the spirit needed to roam freely, to merge back into the steppe, to ride the wind, to dissolve into the eternal. A monument would anchor them. So instead, they let the earth swallow the evidence. Grass would grow over the site. Rain would smooth the soil. Within a season, sometimes within weeks, the grave became invisible. And that invisibility was not failure, it was completed. For Genghis Khan, this tradition was magnified 1,000-fold. He was not just a man. By the time of his death, he was a living myth, a figure who had reshaped the world through will and violence. To bury him as an ordinary chief would have been unthinkable. But to bury him with monuments, pyramids, gold, that too would have been wrong, because it would have made him fixed, trapped in stone, confined to a single place, and Genghis Khan belonged to the steppe, all of it. So they took him to Burkhan Khaldun, the God Mountain, the place where, as a boy, he had hidden from enemies, the place where, according to legend, he had prayed to Tengri and received his vision of conquest. This was not a random choice. Burkhan Khaldun was the spiritual heart of his identity. For the Mongols, mountains were not just elevated ground. They were axes, connecting sky and earth, the sacred and the mortal. To be buried there was to be placed at the center of the cosmos, not above it, within it. The chroniclers tell us the funeral procession moved in absolute secrecy. But what did that look like? Imagine a line of horsemen stretching across the steppe. No banners, no drums. The cart carrying the body moves slowly, covered in white felt, the color of mourning, the color of purity. Behind it, shamans chant in low voices, not to the crowd, because there is no crowd, but to the sky, to Tengri. Every few miles, a rider breaks from the formation. They intercept travelers, herders, anyone who might have seen it, and they are silenced, not out of cruelty, but because witnessing this moment was to carry knowledge too sacred, and too dangerous to survive. The procession reaches the mountain. The grave is dug, perhaps by soldiers sworn to secrecy, perhaps by shamans who would die before speaking. The body is lowered. Possessions with him, perhaps his bow, his sword, objects that held his spirit. Then the earth closes over him, and the horses come. 10,000 hooves, the chroniclers say, pounding the ground, not just to flatten the soil, but to bless it, to return it to the steppe, to make it inseparable from the land itself. By the time the last hoof strikes the ground, there is no grave, there is only earth, grass, wind, and somewhere beneath it all, a man who had been a storm, now silent, now dissolved back into the world he had conquered. This is what the Mongols understood, that true power doesn't need to be seen, that the greatest rulers are the ones who become indistinguishable from the land itself. That memory, when it's vast enough, doesn't need a marker. It becomes the air. And so, Genghis Khan was not buried. He was released into the steppe, into the sky, into 800 years of silence. But silence, no matter how deliberate, invites obsession. And for 8 centuries the world has been obsessed. Because where there is mystery, there is desire. And where there is a hidden emperor, there are hunters. The search for Genghis Khan's tomb is not one story. There are dozens. Centuries of expeditions, fantasies, failures, each one believing they would be different, that they would succeed where empires had failed. Let's walk through them, slowly, because every hunt reveals something, not just about the tomb, but about the hunters themselves. The Chinese emperors. The first to search were the Chinese. The Ming dynasty, which rose after the Mongol Yuan dynasty fell in 1368, had every reason to want the tomb. Not to honor Genghis Khan, to erase him. For the Ming emperors, the Mongols were invaders, barbarians who had ruled China for nearly a century. To find the tomb would be to defile it, to erase the conqueror's legacy, to reassert Chinese dominance over the narrative of history. But they never found it. The Mongols, even in retreat, guarded the secret, and the steppe, vast, silent, unforgiving, swallowed every search party sent into its expanse. Maps were drawn, informants were bribed, prisoners were tortured for information. Nothing. The tomb remained a phantom. The Russians and the Soviets centuries later, another empire tried. The Russian Empire, expanding eastward in the 19th century, grew fascinated with Mongol history. Explorers, archaeologists, adventurers, they poured into Mongolia, convinced that modern science could solve what ancient warriors could not. They brought shovels, they brought theories, they brought arrogance, and the steppe humbled them too. Then came the Soviets. In the 1920s, Mongolia became a Soviet satellite state, and Stalin's regime saw opportunity, not spiritual, politics. To find Genghis Khan's tomb would be to claim his legacy, to rewrite him as a hero of the people, to use his bones as propaganda. Soviet archaeologists were dispatched. They searched Burkhan, Khaldan. They excavated valleys. They interviewed elderly Mongols who still whispered the old stories. But there was a problem. The Mongols themselves resisted. Not violently, quietly. They misdirected. They withheld. They protected the secret as their ancestors had. Not with weapons, but with silence. Because even under Soviet rule, even with their religion suppressed and their traditions criminalized, the Mongols remembered. Some things are not meant to be found. The Soviet expeditions ended in failure. And the tomb remained hidden. The age of satellites. Then came the 21st century. Technology had advanced in ways the ancient Mongols could never have imagined. Satellite imagery, ground-penetrating radar, LiDAR, scanning that could see through vegetation, through soil, through time itself. Surely, now the tomb would be found. In 2001, a University of Chicago expedition arrived in Mongolia. Led by Maury Kravitz, a Chicago lawyer turned amateur archaeologist, the team used satellite data to identify possible burial sites near Burkhan Khaldun. They scanned, they excavated, they analyzed, and they found nothing. Or rather, they found too much. Anomalies everywhere, ancient structures, burial mounds from other eras, traces of habitation scattered across centuries. But no tomb, no definitive site. The steppe, it turned out, was a palimpsest, layer upon layer of history, all of it blurred together by wind and time. In 2004, a Japanese Mongolian team tried. They focused on the Khenti Mountains, using advanced geological surveys. They found promising sites, excavated them carefully, and again, nothing. Then, in 2015, a new approach emerged. Dr. Albert Yu-Min Lin, an engineer and explorer, launched the Valley of the Khans project. This time, the method was different. Instead of sending archaeologists into the field blindly, Lin crowdsourced the search. He released thousands of high-resolution satellite images to the public. Anyone, anywhere in the world, could analyze the images, looking for anomalies, irregularities, signs of human activity. It was archaeology by algorithm, by collective intelligence. Millions of images were analyzed, dozens of promising sites were flagged, and Lin's team investigated them. One by one, and one by one, they led nowhere. Here's what these failures reveal. The tomb is not hidden because it's in a clever location. It's hidden because the idea of finding it may be impossible. Think about it. 800 years of erosion. 800 years of grass growing, dying, regrowing. 800 years of rain, snow, wind, earthquakes. If the tomb was shallow, it's been scattered by nature. If it was deep, it'd be compressed, shifted, buried under meters of sediment. If it was marked by anything, stones, wood, metal, those markers are now dust. And if the Mongols truly diverted a river over it, as some chronicles suggest, then the entire landscape has been rewritten. The riverbed has moved. The valley has changed shape. The coordinates themselves have become meaningless. But there's another possibility, one that archaeologists whisper about but rarely say aloud. What if the tomb was never meant to survive? What if the Mongols didn't just hide it, but designed it to dissolve? A shallow grave in soft soil, a body wrapped in biodegradable materials, no metals, no stone, just flesh, bone, silk, and time. In 8 centuries, a body can become indistinguishable from the earth. DNA breaks down. Organic matter composts, even bones without the right conditions, crumble into powder. What if, after all this searching, the reason we can't find Genghis Khan, is it because there's nothing left to find? And yet, the searches continue. Every few years, a new team announces a new theory, a new technology, a new hope. Because the tomb is not just a historical curiosity, it is the last mystery of the greatest conqueror who ever lived. And mysteries, once they take root, do not let go. They haunt, they compel, they whisper, keep looking, even when the steppe itself says, stop. So let's stop for a moment. Step back from the excavations, the satellites, the centuries of searching, and ask a different question. What does this silence mean? Because here's the thing about power. We measure it in monuments, the pyramids of Giza, the Taj Mahal, the Great Wall. These structures scream across time. I was here, I mattered. Remember me. They are declarations carved in stone, defiant acts against the inevitability of forgetting. And we admire them. We travel thousands of miles to stand before them. We take photographs. We tell our children, this is what greatness looks like. But Genghis Khan chose the opposite. He chose to be forgotten, or rather, he chose to be remembered differently. Think about what that means. A man who commanded the largest contiguous empire in human history, an empire that stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the edges of Europe, decided that his legacy would not be written in stone. It would be written in absence, in wind, in grass, in the mystery itself. This is a kind of power we rarely talk about. Not the power to build, the power to let go. Most rulers cling. They cling to life, to glory, to memory. They commission statues of themselves, twice life-size, cast in bronze, gazing heroically toward some imagined future. They write their names on every victory, every law, every temple. They need the world to remember them because they fear what comes after: silence, irrelevance, dust. But Genghis Khan understood something deeper. He understood that monuments are not immortality. They are targets. Every statue can be toppled. Every pyramid can be looted. Every name carved in stone can be chiseled away by enemies. History is full of defaced monuments, kings whose faces were erased by the dynasties that followed, emperors whose tombs were raided and emptied, conquerors whose bones were scattered as acts of revenge. To be remembered in stone is to give your enemies a place to strike. But to vanish, to become unmappable, that is to become untouchable. There's another layer to this. The Mongols believed that the spirit needed space to roam, that death was not an ending, but a transformation, from the physical to the eternal, from the body to the sky. To build a tomb would be to cage that spirit, to trap it in a single location, to make it small. But by dissolving into the steppe, Genghis Khan became everywhere. Every blade of grass in Mongolia, every gust of wind across the Khenti Mountains, every sunrise over Burkhan Khaldun. He is not in one place, he is in all places. This is the paradox. By refusing to be found, he became impossible to escape. And perhaps that's why the searches never stop, because we, in the modern world, have lost this understanding. We think power is visible, tangible, measurable. We think legacy is something you can visit on a Sunday afternoon with a ticket and a guidebook. But Genghis Khan's legacy is not behind glass in a museum. It lives in the DNA of 16 million people, descendants who carry his genes without knowing his grave. It lives in the languages, the trade routes, the cultural exchanges that his empire forced into existence. It lives in the very fact that we are still searching, still wondering, still captivated by a man who died 800 years ago. Most emperors are remembered despite their deaths. Genghis Khan is remembered because of his, because the mystery itself became the monument. The search became the pilgrimage, and the silence, that vast, unbroken silence, became louder than any inscription could ever be. This is what the tomb's absence teaches us. That true power is not what you hold on to, it's what you release. That legacy is not what you build, it's what you become. And that sometimes the most profound act a ruler can perform is to disappear, not into death, but into legend, into the earth, into 800 years of wind and grass and unanswered questions. And maybe, just maybe, that was always the point. Not to be found, but to be endless. So here we are, 800 years later, standing at the edge of the same question. Where is Genghis Khan? And the answer perhaps has been waiting all along. He is where he always wanted to be. Somewhere in Mongolia, beneath a sky that stretches impossibly wide, the grass grows. It dies in winter, returns in spring. The wind moves through it, the same wind that carried his armies across continents, the same wind that whispered through his childhood on these plains. And beneath that grass, somewhere, or perhaps nowhere at all anymore, rests a man who understood what so few rulers ever do: that the greatest throne is the one you walk away from. He had seen what happened to kings. Their tombs raided. Their names were cursed. Their empires crumbled the moment their hearts stopped beating. He had watched cities fall and rise and fall again. And he knew, stone does not last. Gold does not protect. Memory is fragile. But the earth endures. The steppe endures. The sky endures. So when his time came, he didn't ask for a pyramid. He didn't demand eternal flames or guarded gates. He asked for what he had always known, the open land, the unmarked horizon, the freedom to dissolve back into the world. And maybe that's why we keep searching. Not because we truly believe we'll find him, but because the search itself is a kind of communion. Every expedition that ventures into the Khenti Mountains, every satellite that scans the steppe, every archaeologist who kneels in the grass with a trowel and a hope, they are all, in their own way, continuing the conversation. With a man who refused to speak from beyond the grave, with a ruler who chose silence over monuments, with an emperor who became, in the end, just wind. There's a Mongolian saying, passed down through generations, the wolf that howls at the moon leaves no tracks. Genghis Khan was that wolf. His howl echoed across the world, reshaping borders, rewriting history, leaving a mark so deep it is still felt today. But his tracks, those he erased, deliberately, completely, as if to say, I was here, and that is enough. So tonight, as the wind moves across Mongolia, as the grass bends and rises, somewhere beneath it all, or nowhere at all, lies the answer to a question the world will never stop asking. And maybe, in the end, that's exactly how he wanted it. Not forgotten, but free, not lost, but everywhere, a man who conquered the world and then let the world reclaim him, quietly, completely, forever. And so the mystery remains. Not because we haven't tried hard enough, not because the technology isn't there yet, but because some secrets are kept not by walls or locks, but by time itself, by wind, by silence, by a choice made 800 years ago, beneath a sky that has seen empires rise and fall and rise again. Genghis Khan's tomb will likely never be found. And perhaps that's not a failure of archaeology. Perhaps it's the success of a vision that understood legacy differently than we do. That understood power not as something to be carved in stone, but as something to be released into the endless expanse of the steppe. So if you find yourself thinking about this tonight, about a man who vanished so completely, the earth itself forgot where he rests, know that you're not alone. Historians, archaeologists, dreamers, they've all stood where you're standing now, at the edge of a question with no answer, at the border of mystery and reverence. And if that feeling lingers, if the wind and the grass and the silence still call to you, then return. There are other stories waiting, other whispers from history, other moments when the past reaches forward and touches the present with a question we cannot answer, only honor. Until then, rest well, and let the mystery be what it was always meant to be: infinite.